For decades, we've been told that eggs are the gold standard for muscle-building protein. And they are excellent. But what if I told you there's another food, just elevated by the new 2026 food pyramid, that delivers more complete protein per gram, more calcium, more beneficial fat for your hormones, and it costs less per serving? The best part? If you're over 60, you probably already have it in your refrigerator. The food I'm talking about is aged cheese. Yes, cheese. Parmesan, cheddar, Gouda. The very foods we were told for 40 years to avoid. The 2026 dietary guidelines have formally reversed this advice, acknowledging that the old science was deeply flawed. What was once seen as a cardiovascular risk is now recognized as one of the most nutritionally dense foods you can buy. This isn't just an opinion, it's a major and quiet correction in modern nutritional science. So, let's break down why aged cheese is a powerhouse, especially for adults over 60. Per 100 grams, aged Parmesan packs about 38 grams of complete protein. That's more than eggs, more than chicken breast, and far more than most plant-based proteins you can realistically eat in one sitting. It's also loaded with highly absorbable calcium, fat-soluble vitamins like A and K2, and a profile of fatty acids now recognized as beneficial. And when you compare the price per gram of protein, aged hard cheese is one of the most affordable and accessible animal proteins at your local supermarket. Now, before we go further, a quick disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes. If you have lactose intolerance, kidney disease, or any condition affected by dairy or high-protein intake, please talk to your doctor before making any big changes to your diet. Individual health needs always come first. For those of you who can enjoy dairy, this is a game-changer for fighting age-related muscle loss, or sarcopenia. Here's a crucial piece of the puzzle that's often missed. Protein needs fat to work its magic. When you eat protein without enough fat, you blunt the muscle-building signal. Why? Because your body needs dietary fat to produce the hormones essential for muscle growth and repair, like testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1. A low-fat, high-protein diet is simply less effective for building muscle than the same amount of protein consumed with natural fats. Aged cheese delivers both in one perfect, delicious package. Let me tell you about George. He was 69 and was doing everything right. He ate eggs every morning, exercised consistently, and was very health-conscious. But he was still losing strength, and it worried him. A sports nutritionist looked at his diet and spotted the problem immediately. His fat intake was too low. He was eating egg whites, choosing low-fat dairy, and avoiding cooking oils. He had plenty of protein, but not the fat to support it. The nutritionist made one simple change. She added 40 grams of aged cheddar to his daily routine and had him start eating whole eggs again. Just 6 weeks later, George's grip strength improved by 12%. The fat from the cheese and egg yolks provided the hormonal support his body needed to finally use the protein he was eating to build real muscle. The materials were there all along. He just needed the right conditions to put them to work. What's your relationship with cheese been like? Did you give it up based on that old advice? Let me know in the comments. And if you're ready to bring aged cheese back to your plate, type, "Real food builds real muscle." Please give this video a like, so more people who need to hear this message can find it. The guidance that made you fear this food was wrong, and now we have the official reversal to prove it. Now, let's talk about calcium, because the story in aged cheese is about more than just bones. Calcium is a critical player in muscle contraction. Every time a muscle fiber fires, it relies on a calcium-driven signal. If your calcium levels are low, your muscle function is compromised right at the cellular level. The calcium in aged hard cheese is incredibly bioavailable. meaning your body can easily absorb and use it. It comes naturally packaged with two important partners, vitamin K2 and vitamin D. Vitamin D helps you absorb calcium in your gut, and vitamin K2 acts like a traffic cop, directing that calcium to your bones and away from your arteries, where it can cause problems. This makes aged cheese a far more effective calcium source than many supplements, which often lack these crucial cofactors. But what about lactose intolerance? Here's some great news. During the curing and aging process, bacteria consume virtually all the lactose in the cheese. This is why many people who can handle a glass of milk or fresh dairy find they can eat aged cheeses like Parmesan, cheddar, and Gouda with no issues at all. Of course, if you have a severe allergy, you should still be cautious. But for many with intolerance, aged cheese is back on the menu. The final piece I want to highlight is the superstar nutrient you've probably never heard of, vitamin K2. Its absence from our nutritional conversation has been a huge oversight, especially for older adults. For years, people were told to avoid full-fat dairy and animal fats, which are the primary sources of K2. At the same time, they were told to take calcium supplements. This created a dangerous situation where calcium was being absorbed but not properly routed. Without enough K2, calcium can end up in soft tissues like arteries instead of bones. The 2026 guidelines embrace of full-fat dairy is a powerful step toward correcting the widespread K2 deficiency caused by decades of low-fat advice. For most of us in the Western world, aged cheese is by far the easiest and tastiest way to get this vital nutrient back into our diet. So, to recap, the official guidance has changed. Full-fat aged cheese is no longer the enemy. It's a nutritional powerhouse, packed with more protein than eggs, highly bioavailable calcium, and the healthy fats and vitamin K2 your body needs to build muscle, strengthen bones, and protect your arteries. It's an affordable, accessible, and delicious tool for maintaining strength and vitality as you age. Share this video with someone you know who's been avoiding cheese for years. They need to know that the food they were told to fear might just be one of the best things they can eat for their health. Here is what a practical protocol using aged cheese as a daily muscle maintenance food looks like for someone over 60. 30 to 40 grams of aged hard cheese once or twice daily, ideally at meals that already contain protein from another source, eggs, meat, or fish, to create the protein and fat combination that supports the anabolic response. Parmesan grated over eggs or a salad with sardines. A slice of cheddar or Gouda alongside a meal of red meat. Manchego or pecorino as a snack between meals to ensure that amino acid availability is maintained between larger protein meals. The total cost of this addition is modest, particularly relative to the cost of protein supplements, which consistently underperform whole food protein sources in muscle maintenance research. For most people, this protocol produces noticeable changes in strength and body composition within 6 to 10 weeks of consistent application. The broader story of full-fat dairy and cardiovascular health is one where the fear that drove an entire generation away from these foods has not been supported by the highest quality evidence available. The large randomized controlled trials that specifically tested the replacement of saturated fat with polyunsaturated vegetable oils, the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, the Sydney Diet Heart Study, the Rose Corn Oil Trial, found no reduction in mortality from replacing animal fat with seed oils. In the Sydney trial, mortality was actually higher in the group consuming more polyunsaturated vegetable oil. These findings were not widely circulated for decades after the studies were completed, and the dietary guidelines continued to discourage saturated fat on the basis of evidence that was substantially weaker than the confidence with which the guidance was delivered. The 2026 reversal is not a minor adjustment. It is the result of a comprehensive re-examination of the trial evidence that the original guidelines were built on. The aging-specific physiology is what makes the cheese story particularly important for adults over 60. Younger adults eating adequate protein, regardless of fat content, tend to maintain muscle mass reasonably well. In older adults, the reduced anabolic sensitivity of muscle tissue means that the hormonal environment created by dietary fat is not an optional extra. It is a functional requirement for protein synthesis to occur effectively. The combination of protein and fat that aged cheese provides is not replicable by low-fat protein sources, supplemented with separate fat additions at the same efficiency. The food matrix matters. The co-presence of amino acids, saturated fat, calcium, and fat-soluble vitamins in a single food creates conditions for cellular protein synthesis that are difficult to engineer from components consumed separately. The protein quality question is worth addressing with some precision, because the common assumption that eggs are the superior muscle-building protein is not wrong, but it is incomplete in the context of aged cheese. Egg protein has a biological value of approximately 100, the highest of any single food. Parmesan and other aged hard cheeses score between 84 and 92, depending on the specific amino acid profile, making them among the top tier of protein quality available in the food supply. The leucine content of aged hard cheese, the amino acid most directly responsible for triggering muscle protein synthesis in older adults, is comparable to that of eggs and superior to most plant proteins. The practical implication is that aged cheese is not a second-tier protein source. It is a primary one, and the argument for choosing it alongside eggs rather than replacing them entirely is that the two foods complement each other. Eggs provide vitamins and fatty acids that cheese does not concentrate, while cheese provides protein density and K2 that eggs provide in smaller amounts. The microbiome angle is one that many nutritional conversations overlook in favor of macronutrients, but it is relevant to aged cheese in a specific way. The aging and fermentation process that creates hard cheeses produces a range of bioactive peptides, compounds formed when bacterial enzymes partially break down milk proteins during fermentation. These peptides include ACE inhibitory peptides that have a mild blood pressure lowering effect, and anti-inflammatory peptides that directly reduce the systemic inflammatory load that drives much of the muscle degradation and joint pain experienced by older adults. The live bacterial cultures present in some aged cheeses provide probiotic benefit. The prebiotic fibers that aged cheeses encourage the growth of beneficial bacteria. The fermented food benefit is not as concentrated in cheese as in yogurt or kefir, but it is present, and it is another reason why the rehabilitation of aged cheese in the 2026 guidelines reflects not just a macronutrient correction, but a broader recognition of the complexity of real food value. The social and practical dimension of eating aged cheese is not trivial. One of the consistent findings in nutritional research on adherence is that dietary interventions that require people to eat foods they find unpleasant or unfamiliar have substantially lower compliance rates than interventions that redirect them toward better versions of foods they already enjoy. Most adults over 60 grew up eating cheese, developed positive associations with it, and then gave it up reluctantly under the pressure of dietary advice. Being told that cheese is not only permissible but recommended is not a difficult recommendation to follow. The compliance problem that undermines so many nutritional interventions does not apply here in the same way. The food is familiar, widely available, shelf-stable, convenient to eat, and, for most people, genuinely enjoyed. These practical advantages are not nutritionally trivial. An intervention that works perfectly on paper, but that nobody follows, produces no outcome. An intervention that is slightly less theoretically optimal, but that people actually sustain, produces results. The comparison between aged cheese and processed cheese products deserves explicit mention because the food industry, as response to cheese's cultural popularity, was to create processed versions that bear little nutritional resemblance to the genuine article. Processed cheese slices, cheese spreads, imitation cheese products, and cheese-flavored snack foods all use the name and flavor associations of real cheese while delivering a fundamentally different nutritional profile. They are typically lower in protein, higher in sodium, and devoid of the fat-soluble vitamins and bioactive peptides that make aged cheese nutritionally significant. The distinction is simple. Aged hard cheeses are those that have undergone a real fermentation and aging process, typically at least 3 to 12 months for the varieties mentioned here. The label will list milk, cultures, salt, and rennet, without a long list of additives, stabilizers, and flavor enhancers. If the ingredient list is long, it is not the food being discussed in this video. The bone density connection runs parallel to the muscle story and is worth naming directly. After 60, bone loss accelerates. Calcium remains the primary dietary requirement for bone maintenance, but the form in which calcium is consumed and the cofactors present alongside it determine how effectively it is absorbed and utilized. Aged hard cheeses provide calcium in the same matrix of phosphorus, protein, and fat-soluble vitamins that bone tissue is built from. The phosphorus content of cheese, which some people worry about in the context of kidney function, is actually beneficial for bone density in adults with healthy kidneys, because it is required alongside calcium for the formation of hydroxyapatite, the mineral crystal that gives bone its structural strength. The calcium to phosphorus ratio in aged cheese is close to the ratio found in bone tissue itself, making it one of the few foods whose mineral profile maps directly onto the material requirements of skeletal maintenance. Age-related bone loss among women over 60 receives significantly more clinical and cultural attention than the parallel loss of muscle tissue, partly because osteoporosis has effective pharmaceutical treatments and partly because fracture risk is a recognized medical emergency. Sarcopenia, muscle loss, receives less attention despite being at least as consequential for quality of life, independence, and overall mortality risk. The dietary intervention that addresses both simultaneously through a single food is a nutritional argument that should be made clearly and frequently. Aged hard cheese supports bone density through calcium, phosphorus, vitamin K2, and protein. It supports muscle maintenance through complete protein, saturated fat, and the hormonal environment that fat-soluble vitamins and cholesterol create. It is not a supplement. It is a real food that has been doing both jobs for as long as humans have been aging. Your refrigerator may already contain one of the most effective interventions for muscle maintenance available to you as an adult over 60. Stop avoiding it. The economic argument for aged hard cheese as a primary protein source deserves more attention than it typically receives in nutritional discussions, which tend to focus on biological mechanisms without acknowledging the practical constraints of the people being advised. Protein supplements marketed to older adults are expensive. Specialty collagen products, protein powders, amino acid supplements, and whey isolates range from expensive to very expensive per gram of protein. Aged Parmesan, which delivers 38 grams of protein per 100 grams, is available at virtually every supermarket for a cost per gram of protein that is lower than most supplement options and comparable to or lower than many other animal proteins. A 200-gram block of Parmesan costs roughly $5 to $8 in most markets and provides 76 grams of complete protein alongside calcium, K2, vitamin A, and the full saturated fat benefit. The equivalent protein content from a typical protein supplement would cost significantly more and would lack the food matrix that makes real food nutritionally superior in the first place. The value proposition of aged cheese for older adults living on fixed incomes is not a minor consideration. It is one of the clearest examples in the 2026 dietary framework of a nutritional correction that makes the optimal choice more affordable rather than more expensive. The satiety dimension is worth a brief mention for older adults who struggle with appetite. A common challenge in sarcopenia management is that older adults often have reduced appetite, particularly for protein-dense foods, and increasing protein intake to the levels recommended in the 2026 guidelines requires strategies that maintain palatability and eating enjoyment. Aged cheese is among the most satiating foods per calorie available, due to the combination of fat, protein, and the flavor intensity produced by the fermentation process. A small serving satisfies hunger effectively and adds meaningful protein and fat to a meal without requiring large volumes of food. For older adults who find large protein portions difficult to consume, the density of aged cheese, both nutritional and caloric, allows the protein targets to be met with smaller eating volumes than other protein sources require. The difference between the food that the old dietary guidelines told you to avoid and the food that the 2026 guidelines tell you to include is not subtle in this case. It is the same food, evaluated honestly by the evidence that has always been available, with the conclusions now aligned with what that evidence actually shows. Full-fat aged cheese was not rehabilitated because of new research. It was rehabilitated because the old research that condemned it was finally evaluated on its merits and found to have been insufficient to support the sweeping recommendations built upon it. That correction took 40 years. The people who bore the cost of that delay in the form of accelerated sarcopenia and unnecessary food restriction deserve to know that the correction has now been made, officially, at the level of the guidelines themselves. Put cheese back on your plate. Not as a guilty pleasure. As a functional food, because that is what the evidence has always shown it to be. One last practical point before we close. The variety within the aged cheese category matters less than the commitment to including it consistently. Parmesan is the most protein-dense by weight. Cheddar and Gouda are more widely available and equally effective for the muscle maintenance purpose. Manchego and Pecorino offer different flavor profiles that can prevent dietary monotony. Gruyere adds a mineral richness from the alpine milk it is traditionally made from. Any of these, consumed in 30 to 40 gram portions once or twice daily as part of a protein-adequate overall diet, will produce the anabolic and nutritional benefit described in this video. The specific cheese matters less than the habit of including it. Start with whatever aged hard cheese you already enjoy or can easily access. The biology is not particular about the variety. It is particular about the nutrients, and all the aged hard cheeses mentioned here deliver them. Track this one change for 8 weeks. Each week, note your grip strength by how easily you open jars or carry bags. Note your baseline fatigue. Note whether the effort of physical tasks changes. The muscle response to improved anabolic conditions does not announce itself dramatically on day 1. It accumulates. You notice it first in the small things, then in bigger ones, then in the absence of things you had stopped expecting. That is what dietary change in the right direction feels like when you pay attention to it. Weak legs are not a destiny. Losing grip strength is not something you simply accept as the years pass. Your muscle tissue is responsive to the inputs you give it, and the evidence now clearly shows that one of the most effective and affordable inputs, aged cheese, was wrongly removed from your plate by advice that did not hold up to scrutiny. The correction has been made at the highest level of official dietary policy. Now it needs to make it to the kitchen. Start today. Add 30 grams of aged Parmesan to your next meal. Put a slice of real cheddar alongside your eggs at breakfast this week. Let your body tell you over the next 6 to 8 weeks whether the change matters. Come back and tell us what you noticed. That feedback, Those comments from people who acted on what they learned and felt the difference is what this channel is built on. Leave a like and a comment. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. And if you want to support the work, the Buy Me a Coffee link is in the description. Take care, and we will see you in the next video.